welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most interesting topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 183rd edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 638th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, August 20th, 2020. I am your host, the coach, Brian Tonsoni. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call, how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment occurred earlier this week when former Indiana standout Juwan Morgan gained a start for the Utah Jazz in the NBA playoffs. This is a great moment for Juwan and a reward for his hard work both in college and in the professional ranks. As an undrafted free agent, Morgan has worked his way through the G League and earned time with the Utah Jazz. This is great for the young man himself, but also provides a nice recruiting pitch for Archie Miller and staff. They coached Morgan for his last 2 years at Indiana. Morgan averaged 7.5 points per game as a sophomore and improved to over 15 points a game as a senior. The best attribute of his is his hard work and tough play, and Miller, in his short tenure, has now had 2 players enter the NBA. Romeo Langford also is getting increased run for the Boston Celtics, and with Trace Jackson-Davis poised to move into the professional ranks, soon Coach Miller will be able to show future recruits that he can get players to the next level. Of course, he needs to lead the Hoosiers to more wins and also improve the offense to really get the Hoosiers in a good place with recruits and us fans. However, it is hard to find fault with Coach Miller's recruiting at this point. Let's hope Juwan and Romeo continue to find success, and let's hope that Indiana can continue to land top recruits and develop them into professional players. Okay, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left,
You'll have fun. Fun. Fun.
and I hit the button too soon, but that doesn't mean that Andy is not here. Andy, what is your bottom line on the last week in Indiana basketball?
Well, in an offseason that has felt pretty weird, I feel like one of the things we would usually talk about in the offseason during these times was, the no news is good news type of weeks. But while many things surrounding this offseason are still odd, I still kind of fall back on the we had a no news is good news scenario as students start to get to IU and things like that. And I think that's all you really can hope for at this point if you're, holding out hope for the season. There's been some discussions on what the NCAA has a mid-September timeline, I think, to talk about what their plans are for the season. They've shown at least some willingness in conversations to be open to the bubble idea that we batted around a little bit last week. So, it's hard to feel wildly optimistic about really anything right now, but there are some positive vibes, at least from a college basketball perspective, and hopefully they can figure out ways to do that safely. I'm kind of pressing forward with looking at teams, thinking about bracketology. Maybe it's an act of optimism on my own part. I pre-ordered my copy of Blue Ribbon today, so I feel like many of the normal off-season things are happening. So hopefully that's a good sign for a season to come. But yeah, I kind of go with these days, and anything related to a sports team that you follow, no news is definitely good news.
Andy, you bring up a good point. There were a few years where we'd have a lot to talk about because of off-season issues, and those it's good to have those go away. And the Blue Ribbon basketball preview is a must. No free ads, I guess, but I'm looking forward to getting that soon and reading up for similar reasons. And to my right, he runs one of the most beloved IU Athletics Twitter accounts, and he has one of the largest collections of IU memorabilia on earth. He is Chris Williams, better known as IUArtifacts. Any recent additions to your collection, and any face mask? IU face masks going to end up going into yours, from players or coaches going to make your collection?
I don't think I could stoop that low. I'm just enjoying the nice embroidered with the IU interlock seal that they sent out to students and faculty. My wife got a couple, so those are nice. But I'm not that desperate. But I did score a couple 2002 Final Four bench chairs that IU used when they were down in Atlanta, which is kind of bittersweet because of the result. But those are pretty nice. But other than that, just trying to take it in and kind of adding on to what Andy said, being here in Bloomington and seeing the rush. I will tell you the university's done a really good job to handle the testing. They're using the athletic facilities in the parking lots for the masks. There's been some footage about some major parties, but for the most part, people are doing their thing because they want to have some kind of level of normalcy in Bloomington this fall without football. But we'll see what happens. And I'm not holding my breath yet for basketball, but I'm trying to be realistically, optimistic, but also, who's going to, like Andy said, we don't know anything right now. Everything's kind of hanging on a thread every day. So,
well, we mentioned off air that Bloomington needs to have students and people come visit. I need to come down to Bloomington, see your new place and your collection. As we see in your background, it looks quite impressive. So this week, here's what we're going to talk about. We have some Hoosier headlines. We're going to try to break the Big Ten into tiers. We have ideas now. Officially, the NBA entry deadline is over. And we're going to talk about that in segment 2, and we're going to take some questions in segment 3. All that is coming up here on Assembly Call Radio. But before we get to all that, a quick announcement. Please continue to support our friends at Home Field Apparel. They're doing a good job with their big new Saturday edition. Get your IU stuff first, and then expand out. The last 3 weeks, shirts have just been fantastic. If you collect college gear like I do, I'm waiting up to make one big purchase here down the road. But you can find them at homefieldapparel.com /assembly20, and you can use that, I believe, to a promo code to get a discount. They're really good. So thanks to them for all that they do. So here are some Hoosier headlines. We have no updates on the assistant coaching position. We know that the Griffin from Syracuse is deciding to stay at Syracuse, and that there are some feelers out to some other major Division I assistant coaches. Be patient. Indiana needs to make a really good hire, and really with the COVID situation right now, we want to take time and make sure that you get it right. Eric Bossy ranks Indiana as the number 1 contender for Mason Miller in the recruiting world, so that's a plus. Juwan Morgan, as I stated in the banner moment, playing for the Utah Jazz, and Romeo played 23 minutes in Game 2 for Boston's win over Philadelphia. So, Andy, anything stand out in those headlines that is important for the Hoosiers?
Well, it probably won't surprise IU fans that Romeo's playing through some ligament issues, some torn ligaments in his wrist. So good to see him kind of decide to try to gut it out and play in the playoffs and get a solid run there in that game 2 that you mentioned. The assistant coach stuff. We talked a little bit about this last week. I think one of the things about everything going on right now is that you probably have a little bit easier job of keeping under wraps maybe who you're interested in and things like that. People just aren't out and about to be asking some of those questions too. So I think that may be one that is further along than anybody realizes at this point, and there may be some news on that front that will just kind of one day will show up and be there because the access to those kinds of things is so much different than it might normally be. For as much as you'd normally like to keep stuff like that under wraps, that becomes a little bit difficult to do as you're, shuffling people in and out for interviews and things like that, which right now you're probably not doing in the same way. So I got a feeling that'll be relatively quiet until it actually happens. And like we said last week, I think they'll make a good decision there. And you talked about Juwan off the top. I think that really exciting for him to be able to carve out a complimentary role in the pros so quickly. And I think while it's surprising to see him ascend to the point where he's starting in playoff games for them, I do think he's a guy based on the variety of roles that he played and skills that he displayed at IU is a really good complementary piece for an NBA team. Doesn't need the ball in his hands, doesn't need, a lot of those things, can just go out and do all little things. Use your favorite coaching cliche to describe that. But I think he's a guy that would fit in well with a lot of different groups and a lot of different lineups. So really exciting for him to be playing so well and earning key minutes in a crucial time and what so far has been a fun NBA playoffs. Yeah.
Chris, what Hoosier headlines grab your attention?
The assistant coach search is interesting, and you depending on how you read from different sources, they're always throwing out the IU connection. I think we have that with what we need with Mike Roberts. As much as I love a guy like Calvert Chaney or AJ Guyton, I don't think either one of them are ready for this position. I think, unfortunately Calvert left when he may have had a chance. And I know that there was maybe some disagreements there on staff, the previous staff as well. But I think you got to look for somebody who can kind of contend in the East Coast like Bruiser did recruiting. I love the fact that Mike Roberts is here. So I'll be interested to see where they go in that direction. Hopefully it's somebody young and energetic and who's ready to do what they need to do to bring the talent, continue to bring the talent in. But it's interesting about the NBA situation that Fran Fraschilla tweet that was out a couple of days ago when he talked about, the kind of under the radar players that were at IU, like Juwan Morgan and OG and Victor, and how they came in kind of not dazzling recruits by any means. And what they did here at IU, both, under Crean and under Miller, depending on who you're talking about, it's amazing to see how much talent from IU teams we see in the NBA doing really well. And, we're not even talking about guys like Thomas Bryant, who, game in and game out is doing really well. And Noah Vonleh, who's a name that a lot of people kind of forget about, because he was just here a year. And then, Cody Zeller and obviously Romeo. So it's just good to see, our program so well represented in the pros overall.
The headline for me is Mason Miller, number one, and then trying to figure out, I'm not a recruiting guy, and I read up a little bit on it. Can he and Kaufman play together is a question that I have, and I've heard that they can, that Miller's more of a 3 and Kaufman's a 4. But it's always good when your school gets mentioned as to be a number one. And then, I don't know how serious this is, but, with the season's up in the air, even a high school, we hope to have a high school season. Our team's supposed to be really solid this year. But you got a couple guys like Duncombe and Kaufman that some people are saying might come to Indiana if there's no season, high school season. It might come and take a green shirt, gray shirt, whatever, red shirt for half a season because of the open recruiting spots. And I don't know how serious that is. I don't know if I'm repeating something that's just been bandying about, but I did see it, and it is an interesting thought. But that's months away, obviously, because decisions on high school, they're better served staying and playing high school basketball, in my opinion, to get game reps. But you never know. That's an interesting twist. I think Race Thompson has benefited from coming early, reclassifying and taking a red shirt. And I wonder if that'll be a new era of college basketball of somebody, if you have all your credits and your maturity level, both physically and mentally, to come early, get a red shirt, that would normally be your senior year of high school. Might not be a bad option for some players. Any thoughts on that, Andy?
Yeah, it's IU with the open scholarships is at least in some position to entertain ideas about things like that if guys want to do it. And I've heard some of the same things. It's at least a possibility. It's a lot of time between now and when they would make determinations about high school seasons. But you could certainly, from I'm a little bit like you, where you'd like to see them get the game reps and be able to actually enjoy their senior season of high school basketball. But from an IU fan's perspective, you get them in the weight program and those things earlier than they would normally. I think you've already seen with Jordan Geronimo, progress he's made in the weight room with Cliff Marshall over the even handful of weeks that he's been on campus. So it's pretty easy to tell yourself a positive story if you can get guys in and do some of those things. So it's intriguing. Something that could definitely pay benefits for you down the road. And, as people have wondered what, if anything, IU might do with those scholarships, I think this does open up some avenue to have some benefit from keeping those open and handling those the way that they have. So it'll be interesting to see. I think, once you start to get more ideas of what college basketball might look like, what high school basketball might look like, then it'll probably become a bit more clear as to how viable that really is for those two guys.
Yeah, and it's just an interesting situation because you see a lot of guys their high school senior year go to a private academy or something. Franklin Central, I think, and I hope I have the school right, has lost 2 major players to go to academies to play basketball for their senior year to get better, more supposedly more reps and better preparation for the college game. You wonder if they could graduate, if that wouldn't in the future. You'll see colleges keep scholarships open. Maybe in that situation, but that's just something to keep an eye on. Let's hope they enjoy their senior year and can go to state championships and do that, and then come to Bloomington in June and get to work on a regular scale. That obviously would be best. Okay, coming up, let's talk a little Big Ten hoops. Now that we know who's staying and leaving, what are the tiers and where do we place the Big Ten teams? From contenders to cornhuskers. Maybe that's not fair. But we break it down next. Stick with us.
This is Vernell Jones. What's better than an epic buzzer beater? The full court dribble and perfectly placed pass to set it all up. And, of course, celebrating with Hoosier Nation afterwards. So join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the assembly call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
Welcome back to the assembly call. You can find all of our content at our website. That's assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to join the chat mob during our unedited live broadcast or watch these replays and see all the in-between segment banner, then check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm the coach, Brian Tonsoni. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and Chris Williams, a.k.a. IUArtifacts, and we're going to talk a little Big Ten basketball here in segment 2. We pretty much know who is staying in the NBA draft and who's coming back, and of the 14 teams, I think there are at least 4 tiers of teams and teams within each one that could possibly fall back or maybe even move up if you're a second or third tier. And so, guys, let's start with the bottom and work our way to the top. Andy, if you had a bottom tier of Big Ten teams coming into this season, who would they be besides, is it just Nebraska or is there someone else that you would add in a bottom tier?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like Nebraska is the obvious choice. They're by far the lowest in Bart Torvik's site. So for whatever that's worth, they're pretty low. I mean, it's just another offseason with Fred Hoiberg where you overhauled the entire roster, basically with transfers. They've got, Kobe Webster coming in from Western Illinois. They got Trey McGowan from Pitt, although he might be I think he's waiting on a waiver. I think the waiver stuff will be really interesting to see what the NCAA does with that this year, but they don't really return a great deal. They get Teddy Allen from the JUCO ranks. He used to be at West Virginia, but I just think there's so much turnover. They were not good last year. So to project them as anything other than the last team there is probably false. And then you kind of look at, to me, the next two would be Northwestern and Maryland. And, Northwestern doesn't lose a ton. They lose Pat Spencer, the lacrosse guy who came in and played well for them. So there's some continuity there that I think is good with some of the young guys that they bring back. And Maryland is, a pretty deep fall, but they lose Cowan and Jalen Smith. And they now have a bunch of guys who are in complementary roles that now need to step up. I think they're waiting on a waiver from a guy from Boston College who was okay there at 9-point a game guy in Jarris Hamilton, but they just seem like they don't really have the star that they've had over the last few years. So I think those feel like the bottom three to me. Maybe there's an argument to be made that Maryland doesn't belong in quite that low a tier, but they're actually the second worst ranked team on Torvik's site. So, and those three are who Alex had as the bottom three on the Inside the Hall offseason ranking. So I feel like those those to me feel like your bottom three. Again, we could argue whether Maryland's there, and maybe the argument is really just that Nebraska's in a tier of its own.
Chris, we were at the IU Maryland game, and one Jalen Smith kind of acted a little bit out of control there at the end, right towards our side, and we weren't too happy. So I had Maryland a little higher in the next tier up, but can totally understand and totally root for them to be in the bottom, as Andy said. Your thoughts on the bottom tier of the Big Ten?
Yeah, you're looking at, I could say Nebraska is a dumpster fire right now. I think is an accurate depiction. I think what the whole Kobe King situation doesn't help it, and then like Andy was saying, you're trying to establish some kind of program with a completely revolving door is just not possible. And Northwestern, it's hard to say what's going to happen because Collins, they had the high point in the NCAA tournament, but then it's kind of been a free falling since then. The Maryland situation is interesting because I don't know how you kind of replace, Anthony Cowan and Jalen Smith. I'm for one, I'm not sad to see Smith go, obviously, but it's hard to say, really if they can rebuild from that. The Minnesota, I could see Minnesota and Maryland kind of switching spots there. I believe Richard Pitino's in the last year of his contract because I think he got a 2-year extension 2 years ago, and they were 15 and 16 last year. You're gonna, you lose Daniel Oturu. That's a big loss in Minneapolis, and I could see them rallying behind their coach, or I could see them fall flat and have another losing season, and that could be the big one. I could see maybe flipping with Maryland, but I'm fine. I agree with Nebraska and Northwestern, but maybe flipping Maryland and Minnesota.
I think that's a very good. I'd be a little leery of playing Nebraska. They'll be a wounded animal, and they'll pick off 2 or 3 teams, and you don't want to be the team in the Big Ten that loses to Nebraska. But he'll spread and use pick and roll, and Hoiberg, being a pro coach, really will take advantage of weaker defenders. And you saw that in the overtime game that Indiana played Nebraska. Indiana was head over heels better, but boy, they put a scare into them there, and then Indiana had to compete a little bit at Nebraska. I think Northwestern will be better. They're the team that could pop, in my opinion, from that tier that Andy just shared. I like Collins as a coach. I just don't think they're very talented. And the team that could join this, you said Minnesota, Chris. I don't disagree because of what you said, but I will say Penn State without Lamar Stevens might take a fall, and it's just how far do they fall? I think they do play hard, but Chambers is coaching. So it might be a situation where, they join Maryland down at that bottom tier, or they replace Maryland in that bottom tier. Okay, so you have 3 teams. You have Maryland, Northwestern, and Nebraska in the bottom tier. The next tier up, let's say the C-level team or C-level tier in the Big Ten, are they all mixed together, or do you have a B? Is it CBA level, or do you have 4 levels, Andy? What's the next grouping of teams in your opinion?
I think the next 2 that stand out are the ones that you guys mentioned, and so in Minnesota and Penn State, and then Purdue's probably the next one that's in there as a question mark. Minnesota, losing Oturu, Chris, as you said, is obviously a huge loss. Marcus Carr decided to come back, so they've got him and Kalsher in the backcourt, but otherwise they don't have anybody that scored more than 3.5 points a game come back. They could be really dependent upon waivers. They've got a big guy from Drake, Liam Robbins, that they'd like to get a waiver for, and then a guy from Utah. I think you say his name, Both Gok. I know there was a lengthy discussion of that on the CBS college basketball podcast. I forget, they use so many different pronunciations. I forget what the actual correct one is, but I think having both those guys would be big for them. So they had Jamal Mashburn Jr. for what that's worth, to make you feel a little bit older. As some of these guys' kids are starting to play, that's rough. So they're an interesting one. I think if those guys get waivers, they could maybe bump up a couple spots. I would not say that I've been wildly impressed with Richard Pitino's coaching. So I think they fit in that tier. And then Penn State, as you said, Coach, is another one that you could see going a few different ways. I really like Myron Jones as a player, but losing Stevens, losing Watkins, are big losses. So again, you've got largely a team of role players that played in support of Stevens. So can somebody step in and really fill the void there? So they're an interesting one. I think they play hard or tend to be solid defensively, but they really lack a huge interior presence and definitely have some questions there with Stevens gone. So I think those are kind of the next two for me. And then Purdue is probably the other one that's arguably in that tier. I know the guys at Three Man Weave had them up, I think, at 27th in their preseason rankings, which I was kind of surprised by. I think it's a bit of a testament to what Painter's been able to do as different guys have left and they had new guys be able to step in. But they've got a decent nucleus there with Travion Williams and Hunter. I thought was a solid player. Stefanovic is back. And then, you got a couple guys that redshirted in Newman and Gillis. And so what did those guys get out of that redshirt year? We talked about that a little bit in the first segment about guys being able to come in and get half a year, what benefit that could have. So I think either of those guys could, will work their way into the rotation. And I think betting on them to be higher than this tier is potentially reasonable given the recent track record, but they to me are the one that's kind of the cutoff before you really get into the next tier, which is probably the teams that you'd say are most likely to make the NCAA tournament.
So we're going to add Minnesota, Penn State, and Purdue to your C level or the third level tier. Chris, I'm going to turn the question about Purdue to you. We've talked Minnesota and somewhat Penn State. Would you agree with me or disagree that as Travion Williams goes, Purdue's going to go? They have solid guards. They have some really intriguing guards coming in as freshmen with Ivy and Morton. And Painter does a good job developing guys. Like Hunter made a big jump last year from his freshman year to his sophomore year. So I look for their guards to be real solid. But Travion Williams had some games where he took some time off and possessions off, and you don't have Harms backing him up. That position's not as deep, and they did a lot of pick and rolls and a lot of stuff with that post. Your thoughts on Purdue at basically number 9 in the Big Ten?
Painter's coaching ability, I think, plays a big role in this, and I think we have to give him credit that he can do a lot with very little. If he can get the guys to play, and I think Travion Williams is going to be the make or break guy, as you said, because his scoring ability and his breaking out ability was maybe not as consistent as it needed to be last year. But I think that maybe he sees with Eastern gone, with Harms gone, that this is his time to shine, and then he may be able to kind of take over games. But, my concern is that Purdue may have to rely too much on their incoming, stars that they're getting, and I think for a lot of it, it's going to be a question mark. I'm not going to certainly be, I think Brandon Newman can bring a lot to the table, but I'm not going to be shedding a tear if Purdue's in the cellar by any means, but I don't expect them to be there. But I do think that they're going to take a hit because, Matt Harms was such an emotional leader, and Joel Eastern had just so much talent on the floor. If Travion Williams doesn't become the player that Purdue needs them to be, you could see them really dip very deep in the conference standings. That's for sure.
Purdue's always known for their defense. Harms was a heck of a shot blocker. And Nogel Eastern guarded the best player. And I don't know if I see someone on that roster who's ready to stand up and fill those two roles. Now, Painter will get them playing team defense. I think Purdue's the team from this tier that could move up. I think Ohio State, which is going to be in Andy's next tier, I would imagine. Ohio State's the one who could fall. Everyone has said they're ahead of Indiana and Holtman's better than Archie, but they've been right there, just almost one game better than IU every year, except that very first year they both were coaching at their new spots when Keita Bates-Diop had that monster year and really bust Ohio State out. And they lost. Ohio State lost some. So if I had to predict a team to fall back down to the third tier of Andy's, it would be Ohio State and move Purdue up. But let's go to tier 2. Your B-level team. You got 8 teams left, Andy. Do they divide up equally 4 and 4, or how do you see this playing out?
Yeah, I think there's a next 4 here, which would be in some order Ohio State, Rutgers, IU, and Michigan. And again, I'll kind of go back to the three-man weave guys. They've been putting out their previews. All 4 of those teams teams fell within 6 spots of one another between 24 and 29, and Purdue actually was in that mix as well, where the Big Ten had this cluster of 5 out of 6 teams. And I think Ohio State's an interesting one. As you said, Coach, they do lose, they lose the Wessons finally. They had lost DJ Carton midway through the year, lose Luther Muhammad to transfer. And they've got some new guys that they're going to have to try to weave in. Seth Towns from Harvard, a really solid player, and Abel Porter from Utah State, another guy who played a lot of minutes for them, not a big scorer, but a run the team type guy. So it's a little bit odd. They really need Towns to play extremely well, and he averaged 16 points a game at Harvard, so that's not out of the question. But I think they need a lot from him. They also have a transfer, Justice Suing from Cal, who was a 14-point-a-game guy there. He sat out last year, so he's been in the program for a bit. So they're counting a lot more on new faces maybe than at least IU and Rutgers within this same tier. I think, again, it's probably a nod to Holtman, if anything else, but you do have to figure out what you're going to do to replace Wesson, who was a centerpiece of what they did, and his ability to step out and make shots was impressive. So they really need Kyle Young to slip into that, because otherwise they've got a ton of wing guys, and Purdue's a little bit the same boat as you mentioned, just in terms of limited post depth. So they fall in that tier. Michigan, they get Livers back. That was certainly important. Their next big question mark is whether Sean D. Brown from Wake Forest gets a waiver. He was a 12-point game guy there. They're counting on a transfer from Columbia, which you don't really know what he can step in and do. But you do have a solid core with Livers and Wagner and Eli Brooks back. So I think they're kind of an odd mix of pieces there, but hard to replace what you got defensively out of Simpson and Teskey. I think that becomes really difficult to figure out how you replace that as you're bringing new pieces in. So I think they might be the team for me that could fall a tier lower, maybe more so even than Ohio State. And you got IU, who returns almost everybody. As we talked about, you lose Devontae, you lose Justin. We've talked all off season about IU, so I don't need to tell anybody the pieces that are in place there. And then Rutgers brings pretty much everybody except Yeboah back. So you got Geo Baker and Ron Harper Jr. and a number of guys who scored 6, 7, 8 points a game. So I think that becomes really intriguing. They're one that may be under the radar, hurt as much by potentially not playing home games with fans as anybody, in terms of what their record has been at the RAC over the last handful of years. But this tier feels to me like pretty solid, reasonable projections to be NCAA tournament teams, but probably not challenging for the league championship.
So you have Indiana in here, you have Rutgers, Michigan, and whom I leave, and Ohio State in those 4. Chris, I'll throw this question to you. Where does Indiana fall in this tier? If this is the tier where they're going to fall, are they going to be 5th? Are they going to be 6th, 7th, 8th in your mind? What teams are they better than that Andy just mentioned?
It's intriguing because I think Rutgers to me is the biggest. Can they continue to play up to the level they did last year? They got a really good freshman coming in, and Cliff Omoyuri, I believe his name, the center. That was a big steal for them. So, I worry about Geo Baker. I worry about Ron Harper Jr., who's just clutch as can be against us, I know, and play solid. And Miles Johnson, I don't know. I think that I could see us probably in the 6 region area. I think Michigan could take the biggest dip. They lost out on that recruit that went to Arizona State. I think his last name was Christopher. That was a big snub for them. But with Levers coming back, I don't know. But can you do much besides those 2? I'm not sure. I would say I would probably put a 6, and I'm honestly thinking maybe putting Rutgers at 5 there. So 5, and then us at 6. The Ohio State thing is interesting because they're returning a lot of the role players. Like Musa Jallow is going to be a senior. I don't know where the scoring is going to come from there. Wesson kind of was able to take control of the game by himself. They don't really have that down low. They don't have an established post presence that's going to be able to do the things that he did and also step outside and shoot the 3. I don't know. I think that if Ohio State does not find reliable scoring, they could really take a big dip, even if they have some veterans returning. Where's the scoring going to come from? Because you lose quite a bit with Caleb Wesson. It's been talked about a lot with IU, but are you going to find the complementary players consistently for Trace? Is that going to be the difference with us being at the 6th position at that tier versus 8? I think a lot's going to come down to it, but I do think that Rutgers could be a contending factor. But I do agree with Andy that, you're 18-1 last season at the RAC. How are you going to do if, there's a bubble situation? How are you going to play if you don't have that home court advantage that willed themselves to so many wins during the season? That's a big question mark.
It's an interesting tier because there's been discussion all off season about which team is better, Ohio State or Michigan, for that 5-6 spots. And some people say Ohio State's better. I tend to be a little different than you guys. I think Livers coming back pushes Michigan. The concern I have for Michigan is I don't think they guard as well as other teams. And then Xavier Simpson running all that pick and roll that they like to run. So I see where you guys are coming, and you've diluted my view of the Wolverines coming into tonight. I was going to say the Wolverines might be a team that moved up a tier, but I'm backing off that right now because you guys and your expertise on that. But I'd like to look up, and maybe I should have prepared more for today, but defensive numbers. Ohio State guard play is important. The one thing I feel good about Indiana is they're going to have multiple point guards. And you look, the 2 Michigan teams are losing very good point guards, and they're going to have to bring someone new in to run the show. Indiana's got Rob Finney, hopefully at full strength. And then, Christian Lander also capable of playing the point, and you have a dominant center. So I think Indiana moves up this tier. I think they're going to be hanging out in 5-6, but I would say Indiana and Rutgers might be the 2 teams that could pop and move up. And so, Andy, that leaves 4 teams for your top tier. Who's going to be the best of the Big Ten?
I mean, I lean toward that obviously leaves Iowa, Illinois, Michigan State, and Wisconsin. And I'd probably put Wisconsin first, as much as anyone who listens to us regularly would admit that it pains me. But they basically return everybody from the team that they had toward the end of last season that was really playing well. They got a couple solid big guys in Reavers and Potter, and then experienced guards in Davison and Trice. Throw in Aleem Ford, and you got 5 guys who are scoring 8.5 points a game, which is important. They really only lose Brevin Pritzel, who was there, but I think they've got other guys that can step into that spot. So I gave them the nod just from a balance standpoint. Iowa is the one that's the lightning rod, I think, for a lot of people, where many people have them in the top 5 in the country. I think that's you can look at the offense and get really excited about that, and you just got to figure out like how good can they really be without improving their defense a lot more than they've shown the ability to do over the course of these last handful of years. So that they may have the most efficient offense in the country when it's all said and done. It's just a matter of if they find somebody that can slow them down a little bit, are they able to guard well enough? So they are. You're starting to see a few people who are down on them, maybe a little bit more than others. Again, I'll kind of reference the 3-man weave guys that they have them. They actually had Michigan State, Iowa, and Illinois all back to back over the last few days. I'm not sure if they didn't rank Illinois that way before they knew Coburn was coming back, but they had those 3, not much separation at all. Illinois, you get back Io and Coburn. Add those to a solid set of returnees there. They've got a couple decent recruits coming in, so I think you feel relatively good about them. They've got Georgie is there. They lose a little bit of shooting with Alan Griffin leaving, and they lose Andres Feliz, who I thought was a really good player. But they've got a couple top 50 guys coming in that can maybe help pick up some of those. Some of the bench minutes. And then Michigan State, really to put them here after losing Cassius and Xavier Tillman is ultimately just a nod to Tom Izzo figuring things out as he typically does. But those are 2 really, really big pieces. You do get Joey Hauser. It'll be interesting to see, you lose a lot defensively when you move from Xavier Tillman to Hauser, but offensively he'll be solid. And it's really whether Rocket Watts can be a guy that runs the show. He didn't have to be a pass first guy last year and took a lot of shots and used a lot of possessions. And so how successful can he be in that role really, to me, is the big question there. But putting them in this top tier is as much of a nod to Tom Izzo as anything. They have talent, but losing a guy like Winston is huge. So they'd be probably the number 4 for me. I'd probably have Iowa 3rd, Illinois 2nd, and then Wisconsin 1st.
Chris, who's your Big Ten championship as you see it, champion as you see it tonight?
Illinois to me, I think could be, with all the talent coming back, and you throw in what Andy discussed. You also add in Trent Frazier, who's tremendously poised on the floor. I'd have to lean right now on Illinois, but I could also see them be in that 3rd spot. But I would probably either put Illinois or Wisconsin at the top. I think that could be a very close contest. I think the returning experience of Wisconsin is tremendous. As much as I hate to give them credit, but I do have some questions about Iowa. Bohannon's ability on the floor coming back, that's going to be interesting to see. I mean, Garza's self-explanatory, but I think a lot of times it'll be interesting to see how teams defend him, if they're going to try to double him up more, and what that's going to do to allow for more outside shooting. But I'd have to put Illinois as 1A and Wisconsin as 1B right now. And I think, the Michigan State thing is interesting. You have the Marquette transfer, Joey Hauser. I do agree with Andy that he may not be as much of a defender down low as Xavier Tillman was, but I think his offensive ability is going to is going to be welcomed in that. But you can never put Izzo out of the option, out of the conversation, no matter what, no matter how much they're down. It'll be interesting to see, what Aaron Henry does to that team with Michigan State. Such a talent on the floor, what he's going to be able to do. Rocket Watts obviously has to step into a major, position, having to kind of succeed Cassius Winston. So those top 4, I wouldn't be surprised if any of them eclipses it. Maybe not Michigan State, but I would have to say 1A, 1B, Illinois, and Wisconsin.
I agree. It's hard for me to go against Wisconsin with their post play and their veterans coming back. I like Illinois as not surprised, but as if I had to pick Illinois, I would also pick Iowa as the team most likely to fall out because of their defense. And I think the Big Ten is going to be at least 8 to 10 deep in the NCAA tournament. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the break if you want to stick with us. But we're going to now get ready. We'll review real quick the top team, Wisconsin, Illinois. The bottom team, Nebraska. We can almost say those things for sure. But coming up in our 3rd segment, we'll answer 2 or 3 questions. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call.
This is Verdell Jones. What's better than an epic buzzer beater? The full court dribble and perfectly placed pass to set it all up. And of course celebrating with Hoosier Nation afterwards. So join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the Assembly Call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Brian Tonsoni. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and IUArtifacts Chris Williams. Remember, you need to subscribe to our email newsletter. We send out that newsletter every week. We send an IU News Roundup, even during the off-season, and after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis. Just text IU to 66866 and go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. It's time now for our mailbag. All questions were submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community, assemblycall.com/community. This first question comes from Ed. I'm going to send this over to you, Chris. Do you believe in the curse of the Showalter Fountain, and do you know where the fish might be residing these days?
The infamous fish, I do not know of its location. I certainly do not have it among my items. I'm sure that was long gone before I even started collecting, and I'm not sure where it is. But The curse, no, I don't believe in it. The lore of the fountain is obviously a good discussion, and I know there were many people that had their enjoyment after the '87 championship, but I don't believe in it. But hopefully that the next time when we win our next national title, we can all go down there and kind of rid the curse, but not steal the fish and not destroy Venus while we're at it. So
I was in the fountain in 1987, and I may or may not know about the disappearing fish. We're just going to throw that out there. So we're going to move on to our next question. It comes from Jeff. There is some talk in the last 48 hours of using Orlando as a bubble facility for the early season college basketball tournaments, Maui, Battle for Atlantis, etc. Andy, would you be in favor of an idea of moving those tournaments to one spot because no fans could attend if it meant the season could start on time or a slight delay? Would you like a bubble for those off-season tournaments?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality at this point is there's no reason to believe that there's going to be crowds no matter where these games are held. So to me, at that point, while watching the Maui floor and the small gym and the soft rims and all that stuff is a part of the allure of that event. The fact that nobody would be there anyway, to me, then I'm all for the bubble if that means they can get things started. It sounds like there's been a number of ideas kind of thrown around where a couple major conference teams might get a couple of small teams and play kind of like a round robin and do some of that. Gary Parrish, I think, talked about that on the CBS podcast this week. So, if the NCAA is open to it, which it sounds like they are, and it's a way that colleges can do it and they can, handle the right testing and handle all the financial aspects of it, I don't have any issue with it because to me, it's not really a make or break as whether the fans are going to be there at this point because I don't think they will be. So if it means we're having games and they do that at different venues, then I'm definitely open to it just for the chance to watch some college basketball.
Chris, your thoughts on moving the preseason, or not preseason, but the early season college basketball tournaments to one or two locations and having all the teams be there?
Yeah, I'm kind of with Andy. I don't anticipate being in a venue even with a mask on to watch a game this year, this season. So I think anything that can do to get the players out on the floor to play, I think there's a lot of logistical situations they got to deal with, and they got to work around concerns about each university's position on it. But I think if they can get them to play and everybody's involved, I think if it's proven to work for NBA and you can get something similar to it, I think why not go for it? But I think there's a lot logistically that has to work in everybody's favor for that to happen. But if it happens, great.
Obviously, there's been a lot of talk with all of the stuff that's going on in our world of sports. We've tried to stay away from it on this segment. We'll get back to it again, I'm sure, as decisions are made about college basketball. We got about 45 seconds, gentlemen. There was one question from Bay Area Hoosier. He said there's some pessimism on Trey Kaufman, speculation or truth. I'll grab that one real quick. I've heard nothing but good things about the recruitment of Trey Kaufman. I cannot promise he's coming to IU. I don't know that that's a guarantee, but from the sources that I hear, there is heavy interest, and as there are from some other schools. But Indiana is about as good a situation as they could possibly be without a commitment at this time, and hopefully he'll pull the trigger on that. And if not, we do wish him well. And they said, what's your guess? We got about 20 seconds. Real quick answer. What's your guess on how many recruits in the next 2021 season? We have one in Logan Duncombe. Chris, how many do you think Archie's going to take?
I think we got two more coming in.
And Andy? Well,
I'd say two more as well. That balances out the classes.
There you go.
That's it. We're done. No more questions.
And I don't have my script ready to go. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us here at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for producing most of the music you hear on the show, and thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again next Thursday night. Until then,
take it from me, Robert Johnson. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
And that'll do it, folks. Thanks for sticking with us on that third segment replay. Sorry about the internet. I do have a full house. All my children are home and spouses. I told them to stay off the Wi-Fi, but who knows? So
the Trey Kaufman.
You didn't confiscate their phones and put them all in a basket next to you or something?
No, no, I didn't.
The Trey Kaufman thing's interesting because I think, Virginia's the biggest contender, but right now he can't go there. He can't visit there. And I think the proximity to home and just the fact that the current situation and, the rapport he's already developed with the current coaching staff here, I think all those play a major role in the fact that I think he's coming here. But who knows? I mean, Tony Bennett's really good recruiting the state of Indiana, as we've seen with guys like Kyle Guys. So it wouldn't surprise me, but I have a good feeling about Kaufman coming here. So
I've heard that the other big schools are not near in position that Indiana has. The one is Virginia. That's what I'm hearing, is that he really would like to take a visit to Virginia, and he's really intrigued with Virginia. And I say intrigued not so much that he's over Indiana, but that's the one of the three big. I think Louisville, North Carolina were the other two. So, and then there's Purdue also that is still in the mix, but I think we're in good position over Purdue. So, again, it's the best decision. I always say this with everyone on recruiting. It's where the young man wants to go, and it's not an easy decision. And we hope he comes to Indiana. I think it'd be good for the Hoosiers. If not, we'll wish him well.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do this. A little bonus. I had a question ready in case we needed it for segment 2. The venues, the toughest venues in the Big Ten to play, and then that can kind of be added to the question that if there are no fans or we have to move to a bubble, which teams tend to lose the most for moving out of their home court or having no fans? Andy, we'll start with you. What would you say is the toughest Big Ten venue to play?
Well, I mean, the toughest for IU is apparently Wisconsin, but I'm not sure if you're not being team specific, but I don't know. It definitely pains me to say it, but Purdue is a really, really tough place to play. I think they consistently, rate up there as one of the tougher places to play when things are really going well there. They show up early. They're loud. You can attest to that from covering games there. So I think that's one. I think the Breslin Center has been one that has always been really thought of up there as well, just because you got everybody so close to the floor when you have that. Those would be the couple that stand out. I mean, whoever, Wisconsin, I think has certainly been difficult for IU. I don't know that it's inherently difficult. I think some of the difficulty there is their style of play. Probably some arguments to be made for the officiating by IU fans and things like that. And we talked about Rutgers in the RAC. I mean, I remember watching them play games there even when they were back in the Big East, and just a small place really gets rocking. They got behind that team a ton last year. So I probably would say Purdue first and maybe Michigan State second. But I think Rutgers is kind of a sneaky one there.
Chris, your thoughts on venues?
We were talking about people on the floor, and it reminded me of the old rec hall at Penn State where the fans were like right on the edge of the floor, and that made me think about that. But the Kohl Center, we don't have a great track record there. I think Michigan State, I think that one still kind of has our number. I think the barn just messes with us. I think the floor setup messes with us. I think, honestly, though, of all the venues that I would want to visit that I haven't been to, the barn would be at the top of the list just because of the fact that it's historic and it's the oldest venue that I'm aware of still using the Big Ten, and the fact that all these other modern facilities that are much bigger, and I think that just brings in a level of coolness to it. But I think I would say the barn and then the Kohl Center probably. And obviously, Mackey is Mackey. And, if you've been in there as a fan, it's rocking, and it's even with our toughest teams, our better teams, we still have to kind of get beyond those early minutes of adjusting to playing in that kind of environment.
Yeah, I think those three, Purdue is just incredibly hard to play. Great atmosphere. The RAC would be up there, and then the Breslin Center, because of those students right on the floor, really get after it hard. And I do like your selection of the barn just because it's different. That's where I think Hinkle adds something to the way it's set up and the old style gyms. I think that plays into the home team's favor. The
fans are right on top of you.
Yeah, Wisconsin, I think, just gets official bonus. I mean, that building is brand new, and the same with Ohio State. It's not bad atmosphere, but those bigger stadiums that go up, they're not as tough, I don't think, to play in as you get some of those older gyms. Or the Breslin Center's a newer version, but it's not so big. I mean, it doesn't host NCAA tournaments. It's not big enough to do that. It's just kind of on top of each other, like you said there. It'll be interesting to see with no fans. I think Assembly Hall is a great home court advantage. When it gets rocking and Indiana gets playing for big games, it's hard to play in there, and it's so unique with the sides too. I think that vision and all those kinds of things play with shooters, and it needs to get back to a big home court advantage. But it's going to be weird if with the no fans situation to see who benefits. I think always goes to talent. When you take away that's why I worry about Rutgers. You take away that home court advantage, and are they as good? Are the players as good? Or they just play better when they're hyped up? It'll be interesting. Dominic says Michigan. Yeah, the way that's set up, that bowl, right? It's more like Mackey. And their students are right behind the bench, too. That's a good point.
I feel like I give a little bit of extra credit to the ones that I know will show up for every game. Like, I think Michigan gets loud for a lot of the bigger games, for some of the big games. But there's definitely been games there over the course of time when they weren't as good, where it kind of it really suffers and is not nearly what it can be. I think at its peak, it's fairly impressive. I just don't know that it reaches that peak as frequently. That's kind of where I lean more toward the Michigan States and the Purdues, where it feels like, game in, game out, they're showing up loud, doing whatever. I think Rutgers is a little bit that way. I mean, they, when they are playing well, fans really got behind them last year, and that can be a tough place to play. But maybe that's why I elevated the other couple above that, where I just feel like it's game in, game out. It doesn't really matter. They show up and do their thing.
Well, and if you think about Assembly Hall, I mean, someone who's a season ticket holder, those preseason games, you can tell that we had the largest student section in the country because they're not there. And I think that's a good, I think that is, they're there for the big games. And I get it, they're college students. It is what it is. But I think that having the largest student section in the country, if that's still the case, certainly in the Big Ten, is a double-edged sword, because if you're not showing up, game in and game out, then, it's one of the greatest things I love during the holidays, because all those tickets on the I can't remember if it's east side or west side, but the side that's facing east side, thank you. The side that's facing the bench, those are full by people that, get to go to their first games, take their kids during the holidays when those tickets are available because students are home. That's a great thing to see. And it really, I love the fact that we have such a great student section, but it also, you can tell when people aren't there and aren't showing up. And you could call it, the talent on the floor. You could call it the competition of the team over the last however many years combined. But I think it's on an upward trend, and it will get better whenever we get back to that point of normalcy.
An unrated home court advantage is Nebraska. If they ever, stopped turning their roster over every year, and once Hoiberg gets going, I think that place is going to be a crazy place to play in a non-traditional sense. I'm okay if they figure out a loophole just to leave. That's fine with me. You upset with Nebraska? I'm a traditionalist, and I was just fine with 11 teams in the Big Ten and the old logo, and I don't know, anyways. I digress. I'm not going down that road, and I'm certainly not going to get the conversation started about the Big Ten as a whole, so I'm going to stop. We tried to steer away from all that tonight, Chris, and just talk.
I'm sorry. There's no passive aggressiveness in that statement. I guarantee you. I'm just here for the ride. So,
we had a good bubble question that had to pop. I mean, it's the current event of the century, but
yeah, it was nice not to allude to it with regularity, though, at least. So
yeah, I mean, not to have the whole second.
It was not the focal point. So
that's
just fine in my book.
You get enough of that with,
I mean, at a certain point, what can you say about it that hasn't already been said as it pertains to sports, and until you really start to be able to see some clear direction on what's going to go on. The Big Ten seems like they're going to, hold their ground and do what they said they were going to do. And
I think I'm abnormal. I admit I don't know shit about what's going on. I just, other than I know what's been announced. I mean, I don't know Dr. A versus Dr. B, whatever. I just wake up, go to work, and
the rivalry of the epidemiologists that are the experts that are giving, it's interesting. Everybody's they're expert in that situation, but they can't come to consensus. So it's kind of like a crapshoot. I can't, I'm glad we got rid of YouTube TV when they hiked up the price because there's no live sports. So I haven't been watching NBA or MLB, and actually it's been great, but I'm glad that I don't have to pay attention to half the bullshit that's being thrown out there by everybody, because it's overwhelming. I'll go back and watch my documentaries, and I'll watch Ken Burns baseball. And at least I know what to expect there. So I'm good with that. I'm fine.
Yeah, I've watched a lot more baseball than I have in normal seasons, which has really driven an intense hatred.
At least we didn't have
me in the Reds bullpen. So.
We didn't have a Tom Brenneman moment tonight to worry about.
Oh my gosh! Yeah,
nice.
That's the awkwardness of the home run call, and then
just sad all the way around.
In the middle, the home run call in the middle of it, and then the ever present. That's not who I am, but you don't say that in the situation where there's a whole bunch of people that can hear you that are just associated with the broadcast and in the booth or whatever. I really struggle to believe that just
you're 5 seconds from going live.
Is the first time that's rolled out of your mouth.
Yeah.
That's not, that's a real struggle for me. So
I'm interested, Andy, how the reception's been. I mean, obviously, but you're kind of in ground zero over there on, it's just everywhere, I'm sure. And how sure he's being,
I honestly, I haven't paid, I was too busy today to really pay too much attention to it. I know they had talked to Marty, and I think he had said, you hurt for him because it's your kid. But he was, Marty Brennan was an institution here for years and years and years. And so I think it makes it even a little bit more difficult for people to hear and kind of deal with. But I honestly, I probably will a little bit later here this evening, but had enough going on today that I didn't hear too much about what was being said around town about it. And different things like that. And just kind of a bad situation all the way around. Like I said, I just don't know how you can kind of talk your way out of it. That's not, a term that you would use with, again, at least some regularity. So I struggle with that part of it. And,
but he knew right away that he's really messed up, and he didn't sugarcoat it either. He said, this might be the last time I put on the headset. Yeah. So he knew the severity of it. And
somebody was mentioning that there was a connection. There was a rewatch of some game, IU game, and Brenneman was on the call. And it was just the irony of that game being – I can't remember. Somebody was on Twitter. I saw somewhere where, a rewatch, or they found a game where that was being shown or highlighted, and it was Brenneman calling the football game. It had to have been sometime in the 90s. But the irony is just too much.
Yeah. So – it'll distract everybody from David Bell's coaching decisions and the fact that who he decides to use in the bullpen and not. So, for him, maybe it's a positive. Although they've had their fair share of COVID-related scares as well for a time or two here and there. So, but I've definitely watched more of that and that kind of stuff. But we did not abandon the YouTube TV after the price increase. I considered it, and then I looked at some of the others, and I was like, is it really most of the others aren't that much different. We had PlayStation View for a while. That one went under, and so we haven't.
Hulu's not bad, but
I'm a dumb butt. I pay for the Direct TV.
We've done
just
that.
call and threaten them to leave when it's time. That's what I always did, is threaten to leave and then force them to give you the best rate. Hang up on them.
I'm a sports junkie, and their sports programming has me just reeled in.
What's funny is I haven't missed it. I have CBS All Access for a month. I've been on these. It sounds terrible, but I've just been renewing like free months with different. I have like 11 different emails, so it's coming in handy here. But I've had Hulu free for like 6 months, like the regular Hulu. But having the PGA back has been all I really have needed. But I haven't watched any NBA or really much baseball, and I'm okay with it. I'm sure I'll hit a point where I'll be on a frenzy and have to start rewatching old basketball games again. So I don't know.
Here's I'm a big bettor, $1 bet at a time. I thought I was betting Cam Davis for first round leader at 350 to 1. I bet at Cam Smith instead. And who won the first round today is Cam Davis. I would have hit.
Oh my gosh. I don't even know. Where are they right now? I don't even know.
They're at the playoffs in TPC Boston.
Oh, that's right.
The FedEx playoffs.
It's already the playoffs, yeah. Man.
I've been spending way too much time studying PGA.
I'm just ready for Augusta. I don't care if the fans are there. The music, all I need is the music, and I'm good.
If you know Cam Davis and Sepp Straka, my life has not been too exciting.
It's getting rough.
Yeah.
I know the 123rd ranked golfer in FedEx Cup. I need some sports back. Mm-hmm. Jeez, Pete. My tailgate bar's in my basement. That needs to go down to Bloomington. It's going to be a while before that gets down to Bloomington.
Coach,
I haven't had Buffalo's.
Get in my yard.
Might have to.
Just come. We can just sit out in the yard and tailgate.
I think I'm going to do a remote assembly call from Jay Horry's basement.
That would be good.
There you go.
It's one of those times when he's doing a brisket or something. I'll just go down there and take my microphone and eat his food, drink his beer, and call it a night.
There you go.
All right, everybody, stay safe. Always a big part of my week. Get a little hit of goodness. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.